Welcome to the Sip and Scale podcast, where we talk about everything business, entrepreneurship, and startups. My name is Blendi Muriqi. I'm the CEO and founder of Delegate.co. Each week, you'll join us as we talk with industry experts and business owners, sharing actionable insights to drive your business forward. So grab your favorite beverage and let's sip our way to success. Welcome to another episode of the Sip and Scale podcast. Today, we're excited to welcome Mafalda Johannsen. Mafalda is a tech industry leader who helps EU companies cut cloud costs while maintaining reliability and compliance. She's also the host of two inspiring podcasts. You guys should definitely go and watch these. A Day in the Life of a Persona and the Sales Training Dreadly Sins. She shares stories and strategies for growth, and she focuses her energy on helping sales teams grow and prosper. As a masterclass instructor with SDRs of Germany, a sought-after speaker, and a soon-to-be author, Mafalda brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to sales. This is going to be a really great conversation. I think a lot of sales teams, startups will take a lot of value from her insights. We're really happy to have you onto the podcast. Mafalda, welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for such an amazing intro. You can describe my CV better than myself, so thank you for that.
Awesome. Well, it's a pleasure to have you. Let's get started with, before we jump into everything sales, let's start with a story that I saw, a little blurb that I saw on your LinkedIn, which is about your first sales job, the first commission-only sales job. And I'm always curious when I'm speaking to other sales professionals, entrepreneurs, founders, they always have like this first story that shapes the course of the rest of their career. Tell me a little bit about how you got into sales.
So I think the story is the same for every salesperson, at least the ones I know, and I hope that will change in the future, which is me and everyone else who is working in sales at the moment. We just got into this by chance. And I hope that now that we starting to have sales books and sales knowledge and sales starts to get a better reputation, hopefully in the future people get into sales because they want to, not because they happen to. But I'm still from the generation that I happen to be in sales. So I was living in the States at the time. I'm Portuguese. I'm from Portugal. I live in Germany. And at the time, I finished my master in Florida in the States, and I had an upgrade of my F1 visa, so student visa to working visa. So I had 1 year of visa to work there. But the thing was, I only did small jobs in university. I didn't have a career. I was 21. And because of my lack of work experience and because I was a foreigner with the visa, which, companies prefer to employ people with no paperwork, let's say, which fair, I understand. It was really hard for me to get a job. And I tried, I couldn't find a job. I got rejected. Everyone had at least a bit more work experience than me. And then the only ones who offered me a job were the ones who had no risk in hiring me because they were not paying any salary anyway, right? So basically, the only job that the only company that worked with me offered me a 100% sales commission job, and at the time that was sending people to visit a resort prospects, and I would make a commission with after each person visiting the resort to get sold to there. So kind of again a business development but on site and 100% commission. And I was not very pumped, I have to say. I'm like, this is far from being my dream job. I'm not a salesperson, or I thought so. I'm not tailored to these. But my plan was, you know what? I'm not making money anyway by being unemployed. So I'd rather take the risk, add something to my CV, and that will help me find a better job, or a job that I think I'm going to like better. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do this. But it's funny because I actually enjoyed it. It went really well. And the job I took after was the same kind of job, but they offered me a base plus commission and health insurance. And that was the reason why I changed to the competition. But I ended up staying there. I
Yeah.
ended up not looking for another job. And when I was talking with friends who were having other jobs, I was like, you know what? I think I prefer what I'm doing.
You mentioned like, in the beginning, like doing it for the CV. And I think like a lot of people, they'll go into a career path because it's a resume booster, but they don't realize that there are certain skills they're acquiring along the way that are much more valuable than any sort of filler in a
Yeah.
CV.
Yeah, I agree. It's like every skill is transferable and anything you do or you learn is useful. And I think like any book you read, any movie you watch, and any small job you do, you're gonna learn something that can be useful for the future. And like I had hobbies when I was younger. I did theater for 5 years, I did classic music school for 7 years, and I still use the same skills, you know? A job I had when I went to Berlin that's not on my LinkedIn. I did it for a couple of months. I was doing pub crawls, you know, like so,
Mm,
and I think in every job I had, I have skills that really help me to be a better professional where I am at the moment. So absolutely, I think people should always be opening to learning, no matter what, and no matter in any situation, and that's way more important than titles.
and there are some skills that I think are universally applicable to any sort of career, any sort of industry. And my friend, one of my good friends, who's also been on the podcast, Carlos, he refers to sales as the God skill, because it's like if you can be a good salesperson, you can succeed in any facet of business.
Yeah.
And it's also like the art of sales applies to also different components, different departments within the business. When you're trying to convince uh, people to come to your company to work at your company, guess what you're doing? You're selling them. You're selling them. You're looking at what their pain points are uh, as potential employees and saying, well, these pain points that you're having, this is something we can address at your company, at this company, if you come
Yeah,
work with us.
exactly, exactly.
So it's applicable whether you're in the sales department, the HR department, your marketing. That's why there's so much intersection between the two,
Yes,
between
yes.
marketing and sales.
And it's funny you mentioned that because I have another friend also called Carlos that he a couple of years ago he decided to open a business and he never did sales in his life. And I told him, if you want to take my advice, I would take a sales job for at least 6 months and then open your business.
100%.
Because trust me, your life as a founder will be much easier. And he didn't do that. He opened the business and then he was struggling with everything that was to do with sales.
He
And I
learned
coached
he learned
him,
the hard way.
I gave him books, but still not the same as acquiring those skills while getting a salary from someone else.
Yeah.
And then you make all the mistakes in someone else's company.
Yeah.
You learn a lot, you experiment, and then you can open your business and you don't have to experiment your product in your sales skills because it's a lot of experiment. Why is it not working? Is it sales or is it the product, right? And so, yes, I think as a founder, if you have previous sales experience, you're much better off.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about kind of that obstacle for startup founders that may very well be technical founders. They may be software engineers, and they're building a product or service. They have a fantastic idea. They don't have a go to market strategy, and they've never been on a sales call. For those types of people, where do they start? Um,
Yeah.
I know, like on my end, when I started Delegate, I never had a sales job. I used the skill of sales in conversations within business. I negotiated here and there deals, but I never actually picked up the phone and like made 100 phone calls in a day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So where do you start as a founder if you're in that position?
I would, and I say this to founders, but also to heads of business development or to heads of sales. So I think you should start with your customers. If you don't have a customer yet, because you're so early in your process, you just have an MVP, then interview the people who think could be your customers in the future. But if you already have some customers, I would start there. Whether you are a small startup, a scale up, or even a big enterprise, like people don't interview customers enough, and especially not in sales. They usually give that responsibility for products to develop new functionalities or to marketing for some messaging or customer stories, but we forget to do that for sales departments. And those interviews are different because the goal is also different. So, going back to the founder example, I would interview your customers or people that you think you're going to be customers, and I'll really try to dig on the pain, right? And try to understand what are their main pains, their main priorities, what happens, what's the cost of inaction, what happens if they don't solve, what happens to the, what does it mean to their day-to-day job. If you already have customers, were the events, so what was the trigger that led them to our solution, right? And then after there is a certain event or a certain problem that led them to our solution, why us and not our competition? So what stood out from us? And after you have all of this information, you have information enough to create buyer persona profiles, ICPs, which is a foundation. If you don't have ICPs and buyer personas defined, like don't even go and start picking up the phone or sending emails. You still have a lot of things to do before that. And then once you have that, then you can build a sequence of messaging, meaning emails, phone scripts, to then start calling, emailing, and then iterating. And because the more you interact, the more rejections you get, the better your messaging will be because you will refine it, right? So on a weekly basis, I ask always my team, let me know any constructive rejections you got. I want to know those because that will help me to have the messaging better and better, resonating even more. So I would start there. And then once you're there, you can totally follow advice from there is a lot of free content. There is paid content, but also free content from fantastic salespeople, and I can really, go on YouTube. They have videos. Go on LinkedIn. They have webinars and advice. And these people are, for example, John Barrows. He's one of my favorites. You have George Storm, Sarah Storm. You have Jen Allen. You have Jed Marley. So these people, they share a lot of things for free on LinkedIn, and they also have some videos on YouTube. And definitely follow like people who know how to sell and how to prospect and apply, and then see what works and what doesn't, right? Because what works for you might not work for me, or might work in one region or with
Yeah.
one person and not in other. But then you need to iterate and see for yourself what's resonating, what's not.
Yeah. I think that's I just had a conversation with a founder this weekend. Very interesting kind of Wi-Fi solution for that could be used. It's a security solution, a Wi-Fi solution, all packed in one. Without getting into the specifics, we were having a conversation about the ICP, and I was like, well, I was just kind of throwing out ideas to him. This would be a fantastic business to apply this to. You're looking at like you could be looking at the hospitality space. You could be looking at restaurants. Oh wait, just enterprise businesses need this. And in having that conversation, it made me realize there's so many directions a sales team or a founder can go, and it's one of the hardest things is like figuring out what is that ICP, and do we invest time and resources into that only to find out that this is probably not the right field to go into. Um, when we started at here at Delegate, we started naturally in the short-term rental and hospitality space because that was my background. That's what I knew, and I knew the pain points that our customers had. So it was a natural niche. And what I realized is that the the best thing for a founder to do is to double down on the industry that they're at least in the beginning, because that's where they're gonna see the most traction because they understand the pain points the best. In but one of the difficulties that we had very early on is making the transition then from founder-led sales to then growing the team. So I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on making that transition because you
Yeah.
could do the iteration and then you have to start transitioning and actually hiring people. What does
Yeah.
that look like?
Yeah. So it's funny because in my previous startup, my boss did the same as you. So when he founded the startup before I joined, he was in the logistics industry. So obviously our first customers came from this industry because it was just easier. He got the contacts, and that's the right thing to do. You need quick wins, and you need some runway, and you need some business coming in, and whatever it takes, right? So even if it's not your preferred ICP, if it pays your salary or gives you the money to invest on what you need, that's totally fine, and that's the way to go. But again, I would say that once you start so you have a couple of customers, maybe not the ideal ones, but they pay, and you are on the way to actually, go and do the right thing. Okay, now I have some money on the bank. I can actually focus on the right ICP, not on the ICP I know. Definitely do a lot of outbound and again to understand the rejections. So the more no's, constructive no, so you are on the phone and they tell you exactly why they're not interested, that's a great way. So you can either do a lot of outbound and try to understand where is resonating, where it's not, where do people book more meetings, what piques their attention. So you can have like 3 campaigns at the same time, and with good time management, that's more than doable. Okay, I'm going to focus this ICP, this trigger, this vertical for this week. Call, email, write messaging, see what's going on there, and then you should fail fast, right? And then go to the next one. And then once you start having deals in the pipe, you also see which ones continue, which ones stall, which ones are closed lost, and why is that a functionality we don't have and you should be building, or you shouldn't be building at all. This is just not the right ICP for you, right? So you need to have data points, and you have data points. The more people you speak with, the more meetings you book, the more sales calls you have, and then hopefully the more deals you close, right? And then you should also do a retrospective with your new customer. Why us? Why not the competition? What went well? What got your attention, right? So doing these feedback loops is really important. If you have budget, I also recommend going, for example, to conferences. Okay, I want to see if iGaming and online casinos are a good vertical. Go to ICE. Guys is free. ICE is free. It's next week. You just need to book a cheap flight and accommodation. The entry is free, and then you can speak to a lot of people because they're there anyway. So they're going to tell in your face why they're not interested, and you can dig deeper. So in conferences, you have way more constructive, rejection than in in a phone or an email that don't
Yeah.
reply to you when they're not interested.
Yeah.
So that's another way to get really interesting feedback from different verticals. So you can attend different conferences from each vertical. And then if there is budget, you can always pay for companies like Winter that gives you a bit of market research even, but that's a bit more expensive thing to do. But the more data you
Data.
get, the more informed decisions you have. And that's why certain companies are very, very into data. That's what's make them powerful.
Right. Yeah. The other thing is having an emphasis not on just, the data is obviously of great importance. And one of the faults that I've seen with companies is not collecting data, not
Yeah.
organizing their data
Yeah.
in the right way. Um, the CRM is the lifeblood of
Yeah,
your business. And if you are not, what I've realized is if your CRM is not organized, if your sales team is not adding the right notes into your CRM, if the CRM is not being updated by customer success, you are setting yourself up for failure. You're talking about like, the retrospective analysis of the data. You need to go into your CRM periodically and you need to see where are these campaigns stalling? What persona is stalling here? And why is our sales team underperforming? Can't do that without the data.
exactly. And it's super important when there is a closed loss that you say exactly why that was a closed loss. Because in the end of the year or in the end of the quarter, if you lost most of the deals because of a functionality that you don't have, maybe it's time to speak to product or reevaluate your ICP.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's um we've had situations early on where we went after, I would say, low hanging fruit. So like there are customers you can bring into your pipeline. It's fairly simple to bring them in with paid advertising, and we were going after like very small businesses that were just starting out. And what we realized is that they may need offshore staffing, but they don't have the pocket. They don't have the deep pockets in order to pay for good talent, and they ended up being the most difficult customers to fulfill, and they weren't paying a lot of money. So,
Yeah, and
you're
that's a very, frequent situation where the customers that pay the most, they don't give you much headaches, and the ones that pay nothing gives you a lot of headaches because they are the wrong ones.
Yeah, yeah. But, that's the whole point of trial and error. You go through that
Yeah,
iteration and realize, like, okay, we need to go after more established businesses. And at that point, you use the data to see, okay, this is the revenue level of this customer persona. But then we see that the revenue levels of this other customer persona we're having a lot more success with, and we're happier with them. They're happier with us. It's a symbiotic relationship. We're like, okay, we need to double down on these people more.
yeah, 100%.
Let's talk hiring. So how do you hire an SDR, and moreover, how do you train your first marketing hire? Let's say it's just a cold call. You need a cold caller to come in because you're a founder, you're super busy. You're not only are you taking sales calls and you're doing outbound, but you're managing the marketing. You're managing the growth and strategy of the company. You're juggling a lot of hats and you're at a point where you need to delegate. What does that look like for that first hire after the founder comes in and the founder's doing the
Do
sales?
you want me to still talk about the hiring process, or we can skip that? Because you asked me like 5 questions in one.
It's Let's start with, when do you know that it's time for you to bring someone on?
I
Uh,
would say it's really when your to-do list is the reason why you're not having sales calls, right? So when your schedule is so packed that you cannot generate new business or work on the deals you have on the pipe, you either take a time management course, or maybe even with time management it's just too much and you need to
yeah,
delegate. So I would say that's the point when you are your own roadblock to bring revenue to the company. In terms of hiring, I take a very, let's say, unorthodox approach to hiring. So instead of the first interview and case study, I prefer to send a case study first and then interview the person. Because if that case study is just really bad, I'm not going to waste my time interviewing the person. And there are people who are amazing interviewees. They really nail that. That's the first reason. And the second reason is I don't expect the case study to be perfect by any means. If there is, probably something is out there. But the reason why I prefer to have a case study first is my goal in the second call is to give feedback on the case study and see how people take it. And that's the most important part. So if the case study is like 50% good, so if the things they did well I like, even the things that they did wrong are really bad, but I can see it's just for not knowing, that's fine for me because I am here to teach. And so that's why the case study, it's not really for me to say, okay, if the person doesn't know how to write a good email, is out. No, I'm happy to teach the person how to write a good email, but I want to see the logic. If the logic is correct, I'm fine with that. And that's what I want to figure out on my interview, how they think, how they take feedback. And then I also ask them to redo the case study, small things, not the whole thing, on the spot, to redo a couple of things they did wrong after my feedback to see if they know how to apply feedback. Because for me, this is the most important thing in sales, all of these that I'm assessing. Because how to cold call, how to write a good email, how to define your recipe, I'm going to teach that. It's okay. You don't need to know, especially if it's a junior BDR position. I don't expect people to know, but I expect people to listen, to apply, and to be better bit by bit. So that's the hiring part. Regarding the training, so onboarding is extremely important and people don't pay enough attention to it. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen, and I did a lot of consulting on onboarding for companies, so I can tell you I've talked about companies of onboarding of companies for over 200 companies, and they're like, yeah, just read a couple of things, and then we're in a hurry. We need to start prospecting next week, so just read a couple of stuff and let's go. This is terrible. This is counterproductive. You're not gonna get anything. So the ramp time, so the time between the person starting and the time where he or she is working at her or his full potential is huge. And you want to reduce that. So you better invest 2 weeks on a good onboarding so they are, really well prepared and they start booking meetings as soon as possible, than them not knowing what to do for 6 months. Trust me, you want to use those first 2 weeks properly. It's much better in the long term. So this is things I've seen a lot. I've seen in my own company right now that I've changed for my department. And so onboarding has to be really good. And a good onboarding means truly understanding of the ICP, triggers, personas, and pains. That's the most valuable part. And then you have processes in place, the sequences, the tech stack, all of that, then it should be a smoother experience. But definitely do not neglect your onboarding experience. Absolutely not.
How important is oversight in this, especially like the first few weeks to months? There's I feel like when you're talking about companies that are like go 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 go, what they end up doing is saying, okay, we need to hire for the sake of hiring, and like just throw this person on the phone and forget about him or her.
Everything is wrong here in that process.
Everything, yeah, but it happens very often, and I think it not just for sales, but it's if that is the case for the sales department, it's usually the case for other departments as well, because if they're onboarding someone and then they just let that person go, okay, do your thing, update me next week. Any updates? Okay, how are the sales? No feedback mechanism in place. You're absolutely setting your employee and your team members up for failure.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason is, like, you need to tell them who are, for example, for business development, we need to know who are we targeting and why, and what's the messaging that resonates. And if you have everything documented, sales already written scripts, a list of accounts, yada yada, then the person knows exactly what to do, and then it's practice, right? And then the more emails you write, the more cold calls you make, you will get better at it. but you have to start from a strong position. You have to start from a strong foundation. And so before starting hiring, and not giving any attention to onboarding and training, understand your ICP, build processes, hire one of two people, see if the processes make sense. While you are training these people, record the session so you don't have to onboard every single employee yourself. That's another thing. Use technology. Technology is there and people don't leverage it. So, for example, if I have a session where I explain a certain ICP, I record, and if I have a new hire, I put on the calendar for him and for her to watch that and ask me if they have any questions. I don't need to explain the same thing over and over again. There is technology. So that's why I don't buy it that the managers don't have time to onboard their employees. First, if you don't have time to manage to onboard your employee, you have to make time for it. You need to cut on other stuff. And you can make it really seamless and efficient for yourself. Every time you have a meeting where you explain a process, record. Every time you have a meeting explaining a new product or a new trigger, record. Every time I give training, I train my team every week. So today I gave a training on email. Next week I'm going to give a training on how to prepare for conferences. I basically record everything. So if I have a new person, they watch the videos and make exercises. I'm not explaining the same thing over again. So yes, I do have time to onboard my people properly because they are watching things or reading stuff that I've done already,
Yeah, definitely. When you mentioned conferences, that's something I've never thought of, is like sales training for conferences. I think of sales training, I think, okay, this is the tonality and this is the tone of your voice when you're picking up a call, or when you're making a call, I should say. Conferences is something that's intriguing to me, because for me, it's just naturally like you just talk to people, you go up to people at conferences. What is there a specific like game plan that you should follow for doing sales at conferences?
So when you prospect in conferences, you need to. There is a before, a during, and an after, and you need to prepare conferences. You cannot just go there and walking around. You need to check which attendees are actually within your ICP. Try to pre-book meetings with them, making sure that the meetings are at times that are not conflicting. Prepare the meetings on site. Leave some time to also fish around, but don't make that the focus. Then do a proper follow-up after conference. There is a huge actually I wrote the book about prospecting that you just mentioned in Portuguese, and I wrote a whole chapter on how to prospecting conferences. And I think we could go further, but I didn't want the book to be 500 pages. It's going to be almost 300 already. And I dedicated a whole book how to prospecting conferences, because there are a lot of small details before, during, and after.
Would you say that the number one mistake that salespeople make with conferences is not doing the pre-game preparation?
Yeah, and none. Sometimes you don't even look at the map, and some of them are humongous. You have Web Summit that literally takes half an hour to go to one point, the other one to the extreme, and then suddenly you are running around, you don't know where to go, and you're looking at the map, you're getting acquainted with the thing, and suddenly the whole morning is over and you didn't prospect a single booth.
I know. Yeah. There's one strategy that I've used at conferences is I'll wait, like when registration opens and booths start filling up. I'll look for the companies that have a similar ICP to me, that are larger, that have a bigger client base, and I know it's a different business model or a different type of business, but same persona. And so I will find that booth and I will get the booth right next to it, because I know that they have a lot more brand recognition. As soon as they have that brand recognition, anyone going to that booth will most likely find value in my service.
Yeah.
And to add to that, you're saying on the prospecting side, LinkedIn is such a great tool pre-conferences, because even if you don't have the list of people that are going to be there, the companies that are going to be there. So you just outreach and say, hey, are you going to be at the conference?
Yeah.
I'd love to meet with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And following up on what you just mentioned, I tell that to my team. A conference is not just like a place to go and meet people there, is an excuse to meet people in the same ICP and asking, are you attending this conference? So that's a great icebreaker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I like to think that the conferences are probably not the easiest sales, but the easiest way to build rapport
Yeah, definitely the
with.
nicest way. And to get what I mentioned at the beginning, which is constructive rejection, right? So if they're not interested, they will probably give you 5 minutes explanation why not, and that's super valuable information. Whereas they'll never reply to an email explaining exactly why they're not interested in your solution.
Or they'll just hang up on you if you're cold
Exactly.
calling them.
So
Yeah,
for me, conferences are a way to obviously book meetings and meet my target, but also a way to get faster feedback loops.
nice. So industry, I've heard this feedback from salespeople in terms of difficulty. Sometimes you have a product or service that is very much technical in nature, and you're meeting with the CTO of another company, and you're trying to explain the value of the service, but you are a salesperson. You are not you're not a technical person. You have a script and you have like the value proposition of your product, but you don't know the ins and outs of it. And those ins and outs of the technology are important to that CTO. How do you break through that to sell a product that is very technical in nature?
So that's exactly the product we sell at UpCloud is extremely technical. So I'll go back to what I just said. When, you can kind of get away with things when you have a poor training and onboarding when your product is easy. But if your product is not easy, then you can really not get away with it. So I would say start with properly onboarding and training your sales reps. Make sure they listen to customer interviews. Make sure they listen to sales calls. Make sure they talk to your sales engineers on a regular basis. I have meetings set on our calendars for monthly Q&As with our sales engineers. Make sure that you know what is the most common jargon and explain to your sales reps what does it mean, and all of that ready, and also like train them on how to like really try to understand what is going on in the conversation. And business development has the advantage of, I can say, hey, I'm not technical enough, that's a great question, I think you should talk to my XYZ colleague, and then you have a meeting. So in our case, not knowing sometimes is actually a good thing that you can book a meeting with and that's our job. But as a salesperson who needs to do discovery and demo, I would leverage your sales engineers as much as you can, not only on the sales calls, really to train you
Yeah,
for you to practice. Yeah.
yeah.
And AI, use ChatGPT. I onboarded myself my whole life. And since I have, ChatGPT, it's amazing because whenever I don't understand anything, I was like, hey,
Can you explain this?
I'm 10 years old, or I'm dumb. Can you explain to me in these really simple words? And it works really well. So now with AI, whether it's ChatGPT or Perplexity or whatever, Gemini or whatever, use it as your assistant. You finally have something that can explain everything to you. Just use it.
There's also even now with call transcripts. So like if you have a call transcript, you can plug it into these AI and get the feedback right on the spot. So
My
I've
my
seen.
my other company, we sold these kind of things where we had an AI coach listen to your sales call and giving you feedback right after. Yeah.
And I mean, it is talking about saving time and like the idea of, hey, oh, the sales manager, I don't have time to listen to
Oh, there's
hours of
technology
calls.
out there.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's exactly
Uh,
my point. There are no excuses anymore because there is technology to help you train and to help you make space in your calendar to train.
Definitely. Um, one question I have is like in a more globalized world, how have you seen a shift in hiring overseas, hiring from different countries, and specifically hiring for sales positions in different countries? I know, like, in America, for example, there's this misconception that, you know if you're hiring for a sales position, it has to be within the states. Have you seen a shift in that approach where people are hiring from different countries?
So I think obviously each country has their own legislations, right? And it differs a lot from country to country. But there are ways to overcome these kind of things. For example, I work for UpCloud, but I work from Germany. So I they use Deal, so DEEL, and basically Deal is the company that can give me a proper working contract within the legislation from Germany. So, and then I have another BDR in Greece and another one in Luxembourg, another one in Spain, and we are all contracted by the local companies that are branches of this bigger one that's a partner. So, and you can also do like contractors, right? So it's like a freelancer kind of agreement, then like a working contract. So whether you do freelance or you do a working contract, there are ways to do it. Again, there are no excuses if you want to hire overseas, but you need to see a case by the legislation of each country. But yeah, I've seen that my company is like that. So we are Finnish, but we have remote employees, including myself, and there is a legal and straightforward way to go about it.
Yeah, there's plenty of companies out there now that they realize the benefits of going outside of their country to hire, not just
Absolutely.
for cost efficiency purposes, but also just the quality of the talent. If
Yeah,
you're
now you're not limited to your region. You can have talent from all over the world. And it's not, again, I don't see that cost cutting. I think that's bad. I think we should all make good salaries. It's about, okay, if I have an amazing designer from South Africa and I really want to work with her, I can, like,
Yeah,
because she's brilliant, she's an artist, then she would do great in your product, and I can. Like, and
yeah.
that's great. Yeah.
Well, it's also the value that you get. Like me living in New York City, for example, a marketing executive or a marketing manager, you're a really good one, 200 grand off the
Yeah,
top.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Can offer 50% more to an equally impressive qualified candidate overseas in Eastern Europe or in Asia. And now, they're paid top 1%. And, the is also if the same better.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Obviously, I think if this starts to be like a trend, you need to have legislation so to make sure that we are not putting the salaries down, and then suddenly
Yeah.
someone from New York cannot afford living in New York because there is no job available because everyone overseas is taking. But that's a very complex topic that I would keep for another conversation, and probably I'm not the best one because I'm not a lawyer.
That's very true. But the bottom line is that, there's definitely
There are
a lot of
options.
opportunities and options for companies. And the
Yeah,
fact
yeah.
that your company, for example, it's in another country, but you have colleagues in Greece and you have colleagues in different parts of Europe says a lot about the idea that, you can work globally and remotely and have a
Yeah.
functioning
I'm a
company.
huge I'm an advocate, so yes.
Okay, awesome. 100% of our company is remote. We got rid of our offices.
Perfect. You can use that money of the office in better initiatives.
Yeah, that means that we can have cooler retreats every year.
There you go.
So
Quality
it's
over quantity.
exactly.
No, I agree with you there.
Yeah. All right, Mafalda, thank you so much for
My
coming on to
pleasure.
the
Thank you for having
podcast.
me.
Yeah, it was a pleasure having you. Would definitely now, if I have any questions about scaling my sales team, I have someone to
Yes,
go to.
absolutely. Reach out to me at any time. I'm happy
And
to help. And same for the listeners. If you need any advice, if you have any questions, feel free to write to me because I'm always on LinkedIn. I'm happy to help
yeah,
my
well,
fellow founders and head of sales around. I see LinkedIn is a community, so we should help each other.
That's awesome. Yeah, giving back. Well, we'll
Yeah.
add your information into the show notes, and really appreciate you coming on. And for all of those listening, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time on the Sip and Scale podcast. Bye bye.